Okay, I think that's the recording in progress there. Right, I'm going to leave you to it, Kristina.
Thank you, Mark.
And we'll kind of interact in between, but off you go. Thank you.
Thank you. So I wanted to say, let me just get this. Something is, I think my screen is frozen now. Sorry about that. Oh, this is annoying. I think I need to quit and rejoin the session. Let me see.
Okay, that's fine.
Sorry. I don't know. It's not responding to anything. Okay, let me do that.
That's the issue with technology, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
I'll just pause this and. Right. Okay. Well, I'll leave you to it. Let's keep our fingers crossed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, it's working. Okay. Sorry about this, everyone, but thank you so much for joining my talk. So I'm going to start with just talking a little bit about myself, so you can understand why I'm here and what I do. So I am based in London, but I'm originally from Russia. I moved to the US in 2010 to get my master's degree in photography from the San Francisco Academy of Art University. And I lived for a few years in the US, working primarily in fashion and beauty in San Francisco, then in New York, and then eventually I moved to London. So I'm now based here, and I do now all kinds of photography, mostly related to people and stories. So I decided that I wasn't so much interested in fashion anymore at some point, and I'm more interested in personal stories, and stories can make a social impact. So this is my self-portrait, Portrait of Britain winner, one of the winners of 2020. And I do quite a lot of self-portraits as a record of to certain stages and events in my life. It's the way I process my own feelings and responses to what's happening with me personally, but also what's happening around me in the world. So I wanted to tell you about the importance of doing personal work, first of all. So obviously my self-portraits are personal work. And then this project, which you can see now on the screen, it's one of the images from a long-term project called The Essence of Beauty, where I focused on featuring different types of unconventional beauty, mostly women, but also non-binary and transgender people. So focusing on their uniqueness, featuring them for who they are, celebrating their uniqueness. And so it's people with different conditions, disabilities, different types of ages, ethnicities, cultural backgrounds. So to me, it was important to share their individuality, and also to make the project as diverse and as inclusive as possible, to kind of expand our understanding of beauty, especially for me, who worked in fashion for so long, and I was used to seeing the same type of, very conventional kind of beauty standards, same height, same weight, different skin tones, of course, but still, very conventionally, very beautiful. And I just thought those images just were heartless, right? They don't really translate any emotion, you don't have any connection with them. But when you see someone, you know, more real, you connect with that image emotionally on a much deeper level. And I think this is really, really important. And I see also my job as a photographer and an artist to expand my audience's understanding of, how diverse our world is, how many, different people with different stories, with different issues, how we are able to overcome those issues, how we deal with accepting ourselves, for example. And even though some of the women that I photographed for this project, some people might find them like really beautiful, but when I talk to them, when I photograph them, we all have our insecurities, and especially women. I think we are sort of conditioned by the society, comes from the society, from families, from all kinds of sources, from media, that you're not perfect enough, you need to work, you need to do this, you need to please this type of people. It's you always feel insecure. And so how do we deal with these insecurities? And I think by seeing more different types of people with different physical differences, for example, or different stories, like even showing all the people, first of all the people, for example, they're more interesting to photograph because they already have a lot of character in their face. Even just their face tells a story. But second of all, it's not, there are not that many people that we see that are older in advertising or in fashion magazines and in the media around us. So I think just expanding those boundaries and also showing personal stories, I think that's what can be really, really meaningful and really can make your work also stand out. So yeah, so I'm just gonna show you different women here from the Essence of Beauty project. And what's also good about the outcome after this project was that it was featured in magazines, in the BBC, in Deutsche Welle, won a few awards as well. So it got a really good exposure, which is great on two levels. One is, obviously, my name gets more recognized, but also this women and this alternative view on beauty also gets recognized, which is really, really important as a goal of this project. And so that's why I think it's also, it's important to do personal work and not just, just paid work. Like I said, I do self-portraits, and they are the reflection on certain things, whether in my personal life or in the world in general. So this one was shot in response to the COVID pandemic conquering the world. So it was within like first couple weeks when it all started like being all over the news. And I wanted to create this kind of humorous, but also like very reflective of how I really felt at the moment, self-portrait. This is another one who that received a lot of recognition and won some significant awards. I was inspired by all these women that I was photographing for the Essence of Beauty project, by talking to them and trying to understand how we define beauty, what we find beautiful in ourselves, in each other. It's not just an image that sells in advertising, right? It's in real life it's something so much more. And a lot of times it's about your your personality, how you talk to people, how you carry yourself, how kind and open you are to people. So in like a very short amount of time, they start seeing past your outer shell. They see more into who you are, your personality and your heart and your soul. And so And I was also thinking, for a woman, it's often said, you know, in all the advertising and magazines that, you know, your hair has to be long and beautiful and shiny and all of that. And if you have short hair, you're not really feminine. And I wanted to kind of challenge that concept. And what if I shaved my head and, you know, see if I still feel like myself, if I still feel feminine, beautiful, or at least confident in who I am. So I did that, and I photographed it as a record, and I think it resonated with a lot of people as well. It's not, for some people, it's not really a brave step, but I think for many, especially women, it felt like a really bold thing to do. And I got a lot of responses on Instagram. People were messaging me, and friends were sending messages and saying, I'm going to shave my head as well. So it's nice to see, you know, a response, a change that's happening in people's minds, you know, when they look at your images. And this is another self-portrait that I shot last year. Like I mentioned in the beginning, I was born in Russia, and, you know, being, you know, still identifying as Russian and being from the country that is attacking another country, neighbor, peaceful neighbor, for no reason, obviously, it brought all kinds of terrible feelings like guilt and shame, and you just, you know, you don't know how to process it on a day-to-day basis, and you're also feeling powerless and numb. And yeah, it just felt like I was sinking into this darkness, and it was no way out of it. And just watching the news every day, trying to do something, trying to raise awareness, trying to raise some funds, you know, it doesn't help. You still feel horrible. And so that was a record of, you know, those feelings last year, the self-portrait, and it also won a BBA Portrait Prize, which was quite surprising to me. And then now to commissioned work. So I will probably talk also about, you know, working with clients' briefs or art directors' briefs, and you know, when you get a commission, and you know, you get it. I think first of all, you get it for a reason, because they want to work with you, and they want to see how you're going to bring your vision into this project, and, you know, what can you do from your point of view, even they have their own agenda. And so this was a commission from Time magazine for Women of the Year cover. There were 4 covers that year. That was 2022. And so I got a chance to photograph this absolutely amazing person who I really admire, human rights lawyer Mal Clooney. So this was a shot for the inside page. And I also got a chance to photograph a second woman for the same year cover, whose name is Zara Joya, who's a journalist from Afghanistan. She runs an online media that reports on all the horrible things happening in Afghanistan lately. And so I knew that it's going to be there were going to be very sort of serious portraits that would have to be, you know, quite clean, you know, not too much details, set design or styling or anything like that. So to show them for who they are, but at the same time, they should be still aesthetically interesting. And so I chose to work with this very, very soft light. I think you can see it well in this image. And basically create like a one-tone background, but still it has some presence, some texture. This one as well. But, you know, I still wanted to keep it simple and just maybe base around colors and around just their facial expressions. And it's very simple. And I think very effective at the same time, because first of all, it's going to be the cover. Second of all, it's about them. It's not about their entourage. It has to be quite simple and just quite effective in terms of their facial expression. Another commission that I wanted to talk about was Coppa Feel campaign. So it's a breast cancer charity organization that raises awareness about breast cancer every year. October is breast cancer awareness month. So 2021, they were doing this campaign when they were featuring different people with different body types, different skin tones, different everything, different conditions as well. And so the idea of the agency was to turn the close-up of the skin into a kind of like a landscape by applying this topography map on top of it. And so I was commissioned to photograph both these kind of landscapes, but also the portraits of those people who were the models for these maps. And then the portraits were turned into an exhibition in the Fujifilm House of Photography in London. So it was an interesting, quite a challenging shoot, because I had to get with the people quite intimate, as you can see, very, very fast, because we had 4 models during that day, and they were supposed to be portraits and close-ups for different purposes. And so I needed to change the lights from the close-ups. I needed to change the lenses from the macro to the normal portrait lens. So it was quite a lot of work in terms of keeping it on schedule, but also getting your models to trust you. That's, I think, as a portrait photographer, if you want to do a portrait, or even it can be fashion or beauty, or something related with working with people, you have to have the skill to make people comfortable around you, and also to make them trust you as a photographer. So, and then in this case, when they were fully naked, it was especially challenging to just break down the ice really quickly and make them comfortable in this sterile studio environment, and make sure they feel safe. So yeah, this was an interesting job that I had to do. And one tip I can share when you have to do something like this really intimate and get very close to models and do it really fast is to make sure that the team that is working with you on set are also very nice and considerate, and they all are trustworthy people, because first person that the model gets in contact with is usually hair and makeup. And if you're working with someone who is not very good with people, maybe a very talented artist, but I think people skills in this type of shoots are very, very important. Like in general, of course, who you are collaborating with is really, really important. But sort of catering or choosing your team based on the type of shoot, on the type of subjects that you're going to work with, I think that's one of the key important elements of making a shoot successful. So if the makeup artist interacts with this person who knows that they're going to be completely naked, he or she or they can make them feel relaxed and comfortable already from the beginning. They know that it's a sort of cozy, trustworthy team atmosphere, that they have nothing to worry about. And and the rest of your team, of course, is very important. Like your assistants, you have to trust them to not make any comments or any jokes inappropriately, or anything like that. In this type of shoots, it's very, very important. Okay, moving on to the next, this is a personal project. I collaborated with this artist and actor. His name is Paul. I actually had met him in New York, and then we reconnected in London, and we wanted to do this shoot together. So I learned his story, that he moved to the US from Uganda, trying to start his career there, and all these things that he had to go through. I really resonated with his story, and I wanted to capture the story of conquering a new land, conquering a new shore. So we came up with this idea, or I really wanted to shoot him on this location, like landing on a shore, and we dressed him as this sort of 19th century military person, and like this kind of historic outfit, and the crown symbolizing that it's kind of like a king conquering the new land, and celebrating his strength, his resilience, and his kind of belief in himself that he can do it. Working here with primarily color, the light was completely natural, and very, very soft kind of light, like, very overcast, so it's very neutral. The rest of the landscape is quite neutral, but then this red color and his expression, like really strong expression, plus the contrast in his clothes against the background, that's what makes this emotion more powerful. Another personal project that I wanted to share with you, and also maybe emphasize how important it is to prepare for your projects, and how important it is to get to know your subjects or the story that you're going to photograph. So this is what I did last year. I went to Uzbekistan, and there's a republic within the country of Uzbekistan that's called Karakalpakstan. And it's even though they share the land, but it's their own ethnicity, so it's their own group of people who have their own culture, their own language, their own everything, and they've lived on this land for centuries. And what started happening in the 21st century is that one of the largest water resources in the region started drying out. So if anyone heard of the Aral Sea disaster, you probably know what I'm talking about. But the whole sea was gone, or almost completely gone, within less than 40 years. And so this is the former seashore. It was a big port town producing, fishing and producing fish preserves and things like that. And the whole town lived off of that, industry. And so it was a man-made crisis initially, because the water that was the river that was supplying the water to the sea was diverted into the fields, because during the Soviet Union times they wanted to grow cotton, and they wanted to turn the whole republic into a cotton monoculture, and that they chose the worst possible environment for that, because everything was already quite a dry climate and lots of deserts. And so the cotton wasn't growing well, so they needed more water to irrigate the fields, and then basically the sea started just disappearing, and then it was almost completely gone by the mid-80s. So now these girls were born not seeing any water around their town. Their parents probably don't even remember it, but their grandfather that I talked to, he remembers. He used to work on a boat, on a fishing boat, and now he just works as a guard to guard this area around the shore. And so you can see the abandoned ships and stuff. So what I wanted to show with this project is to tell obviously, raise the question of climate injustice, because right now the whole region is suffering because their whole livelihood and also their culture was based around water. And now they're really struggling. A lot of young people are leaving the region and moving to neighboring countries like Kazakhstan, or just trying to find ways how to support, how to support themselves and their families. But also I was interested in personal stories. So it was a lot of research that went into it before I decided to go there and photograph. So I had to do the research of, the landmarks there. What are the interesting, what are the interesting locations to visit, where these different types of people live. So, for example, this guy, he's not a fisherman, but he does what he does. He collects this clay from the bottom of so this is the only smallest bit of the sea that's left. So the original size of the sea was 68 square kilometers. Now it's 3 square kilometers. So so that where that water is still there, the salt level in the water is so high that nothing can grow. No seaweed, nothing like that, and no fish, nothing can live in it. And obviously it ruined the whole biodiversity of the region, because obviously there's no fish, there's no birds, there's no other animals, there's no plants around, all of that. So what he does, he collects that clay, and in that clay there's this tiny little species of shrimp that he sells to a factory that grows fish, kind of like artificially grows. And so that's what they use to feed that fish. So, and he comes from a family of fishermen. And so they used to, they used to live off that, going and fishing. And, there were many, many more rivers in the region as well that have been drying out because of the climate change. And yeah, the whole region has now turned into these 3 gigantic deserts. This is one of the old fishermen that is still trying to fish. This is a small, tiny lake that used to be like much, much bigger. It was like a whole system of lakes there. And he still goes like almost every day and tries to catch something. When I was photographing him, he only caught like maybe 4 or 5 fishes. And this is the last family of, or like one of the last families of like animal breeders. And they basically, because of all the water that the water has gone from the region, like all the rivers have dried out, there's not much vegetation on the shores of the rivers. So the people who used to raise animals and live off of that, they cannot do that anymore. So this one part of the region, they still have like underground waters, and they still try to do a little bit of farming and work with animals, but the future does not look bright. And this is one of the women, of course, I had to photograph, the cotton industry, where it all started. And so it's also very interesting that all the women, mostly women, who pick up cotton in the fields, and they work in the fields for, they come after work hours and work there till sunset, and they all have day jobs, like full-time jobs, and this is their kind of like second job. And I asked this woman what she did, and she said, "Oh, I'm a psychology teacher." And this is one of the younger generation Karakalpak people. Also photographed her in that first desert that I showed you. And moving on to the next personal project, also required some preparation, but maybe not as much as traveling to another country and trying to figure out what communities I want to go to and what locations I want to visit. But still, I always try and do research ahead of time, where I'm going to be, what time of day, what kind of lighting, the weather, all these things. Because, you want to have as much control as possible over the result of your images. And so obviously, if it's an overcast day, the colors will look like that. And then if it's a sunny day, the colors will look completely different. And not just the light, of course, but the colors and everything will change the whole mood of the picture. So I worked with this transgender person. His name is Az, and I met him on the breast cancer awareness campaign, and I really liked his personality, and I wanted to know, get to know him more and to know more about his story. And we connected, and I started chatting. I started asking him lots of questions. And so he's also an artist and an activist. He does a lot of different types of activism, and writes articles, and shares his art everywhere on being transgender and defending transgender rights. So I wanted to know, how it feels. Your life is so different from mine. So can I get a glimpse into your life? Can I try and capture it and tell your story? And so I spent a few days with him, going to, like, this is in his house, him working on his sketches, and we went to all these different locations where he usually goes to, to meditate, or to his favorite cafe, or to go shopping, things like that. So we just and in the house, of course, like his rituals, morning rituals, applying some medicine to his chest to heal his scars and things like that. So it's I learned a lot, and I think by learning and understanding other people who are different from you, you are enriching yourself as a person, but also as an artist. And I think having your own opinions about things and having things to tell, I think that's what makes you a better artist. And so this one was in the Portrait of Britain 2023. And there's also a very interesting story about him going to an all-girls school and kind of being bullied for liking to play football. And this is now kind of an image reclaiming those years of being bullied, and now kind of like wearing a girl dress but still playing football. This is another personal project where I photographed these two lovely twin sisters who are Ukrainian, and obviously got affected by the war in Ukraine, especially last year when it was really, really all over the news. And they had, when I visited their house, they had the TV on constantly, with, all these bombings, reports, all of that. And for me, it was interesting to capture not just the sad side of what is happening, but also the essence of who they are. They are 15 years old, they have their whole life ahead of them. They just kind of got over the pandemic where they couldn't go to school, physically to school, to hang out with their classmates and all of that. And now this war happened. Like, how many things you're going through at this point in your life. But at the same time, they're this very kind, young, delicate girls. So I kind of wanted to share and to show this, like, multiple sides of their story and of who they are. This is all shot with natural light, window light, and I had like this soft filter on my lens as well to make it even softer. And this is all in their house. And this is after school with their classmate. Yeah, just to kind of exploring their neighborhood together with them, and just spending time with them, just to yeah, to understand what they are into, what they like, what they are like, you know, what their interests are. This one's also, well, the one on the right was in Portrait of Humanity this year. So yeah, personal work definitely can bring you recognition, but it also can get your attention from the right people who commission your work, like magazines, art directors, art buyers, advertising, and so on. So I think it's very, very important to see what kind of personal work you would like to do and how you would like to express yourself and your passions. Because a lot of times what you do commercially, it's not necessarily what you're really so passionate about. Sometimes you get lucky, like I got with the cover of Time magazine, but sometimes you shoot something which is interesting, but it's maybe not the most, you know, passion in your life. But your personal work can definitely express more who you are. And when, you know, people in the industry who make this hiring decisions, when they see really passionate work with a unique point of view, it really catches their eye. It really stays with them because it just feels more real, as opposed to if you try to, oh, I want to be a fashion photographer and I just want to create this beautiful fashion images that look like, you know, someone else's portfolio, like this 2 or 3 other photographers that really inspire me. You just replicate the style, you replicate an aesthetic, but you don't necessarily express who you are. So therefore they don't look unique and they don't catch anyone's, or like the eye of those people that you are, you know, in the industry that you're targeting. So I think connecting more with who you are and expressing your personal point of view and, you know, what makes you you, right? Yeah, so that will definitely be more beneficial for your career. And this is another project that I did that is currently being exhibited in London at Alexandra Palace. So I photographed these portraits of children with different types of disabilities, learning disabilities, and also in interaction with their siblings or their friends. Because this whole charity called Way for Change, their whole concept is based around mixed ability friendships and kind of making, you know, children and adults as well aware of, you know, these children with disabilities and with special needs from the very early age. You know, you need to understand that these, you know, these are people living around us, together with us, and they're also very interesting. You know, it's worth getting to know them, and you know, featuring these children and showing them for who they are. I think for me it was important to show their real personality. And to me, they were really adorable in all their expressions. So this girl, she has autism. So she had this like outbursts of sort of not necessarily anger, but she just didn't want to be photographed anymore. And then 3 seconds later, she's smiling again. And so I think by creating these emotional portraits, you let people connect with these children or with your subjects. You know, if they are real, if they are who they are, you know, you connect with them more than when you see, you know, pictures of perfectly smiling people and perfectly dressed and with perfect hair and everything. So you know, this whole series, I think it brought a lot of conversations into around this topic and what we find, you know, beautiful, how the children should be celebrated. And I think the parents were really happy to see their children being photographed in such a way. And now they are on, you know, giant prints on a big display. And, you know, it just was priceless to see you know, how proud these parents were of their children, but also how it really helped this charity organization to get attention to the issue and to this whole idea of connecting children with mixed abilities. And another personal project, also what I think is important to emphasize here is, you know, how you meet people, how you connect with them. It's really important for a portrait photographer. And basically, at least in my case, you always are on a search for subjects and stories. And if you find someone interesting that you think you would like to, you know, share their story with a wider audience, if there's a cause, if there's a bigger sort of agenda or goal to, you know, to raise more questions, to introduce people to some subjects that they maybe haven't heard of, or to possibly even change the point of view, I think that's really invaluable for a portrait photographer, if you can find subjects like that and share their stories. So this is Freya. She has alopecia. She's now 16, but she started losing her hair when she was 11. And it's been a tough journey for her. I think she's still trying to accept herself, to really process the fact that she's very different from many of her peers. And yeah, I think, you know, having of course loving family and friends around you, it really, really helps. But you still, you know, as a teenager, you want to fit in, you want to be, you know, recognized by your peers, you want to be also, you know, conventionally beautiful and, you know, things like that. But at the same time, I think what makes more interesting to me, because what makes her more interesting to me is because she is unique, and probably thanks to her condition, she has had to mature even faster than her peers, and she really understands many more, like emotionally, she's much more developed. She understands many more things because because of your physical difference, you maybe learn more about how to be empathetic and how you treat other people. I think it becomes much more important. So just photographing her again, like spending a few days with her, going to like her day-to-day activities, seeing what she does. She plays hockey, for example. She loves reading books. She spends time with her. This is her sister. I also photographed her together with her best friend. So it really helped me understand her. But, you know, by understanding her, I was also able to share, you know, her story through the images. And I also did a video of her as well. And this is one more personal project that I wanted to share. So as opposed to Fred, this is all obviously like documentary portraits shot with natural light. But even when I do rely on, you know, locations and people's homes or environments where they live or where they go to work or hang out with the friends, I still do like a preliminary search and find out, okay, what colors are the walls in your bedroom, or, you know, are there any interesting locations around your house or where you go to on a day-to-day basis, or what's your favorite park that you go to? And then I look at it on the map and see, okay, at this time of day the sun will be on that side, so we're probably going to be shooting on this side. You know, just it's still work to prepare for these documentary kind of shoots. But when you work in studio, it makes certain things easier, because you can control light, you can control you know, the light doesn't change. You can control also the color palette and the environment to a certain extent, if you are building sets or, you know, creating some interesting backdrops. But if it's a simple, very clean background, like in this project, then it puts more emphasis on the subject, like what are you going to do with your subject, like how are you going to make it that interesting? There's nothing else going on. There's not accidental, you know, streaks of sunlight going through this sofa or bed or, you know, something floor. So it's all up to you as a photographer. So you need to think through every single detail, starting with the lighting, to, you know, all the nuances of color and shapes and textures and all of these things. Even though, of course, you work with teams, and like I said, it's very important to collaborate with the right kind of people. Like in this project, this is called Generation Climate. Also, I photographed these teenagers from 15 to 19 years old. And my idea was to show in kind of like a playful, fashion-y way of, you know, how do you, you know, as a new generation, how do you see this, you know, the situation that's happening with our planet? How can you adapt to the new reality that we're all facing? The climate is in really, really bad condition, and we overproduce, we overuse, overconsume, all these things. You know, how can you deal with that? And so these young people that I photographed, we used only recycled, upcycled elements. So the clothes were either secondhand, or they were used from their parents or their older siblings. And the props that we used, for example, in their hair, were all like recycled things, you know, objects that you use for something else. So these were nets for fruits and vegetables. And we had some playful makeup elements to support that. So these are the twin sisters, as you've seen before, but I used them for this project again. You know, like reusing the Christmas or gift wrapping ribbons in their hair. And this was also a really amazing guy who's also like all these elements, his accessories in his hair, also reused, or like props that you would use for something else. So, you know, it's a simple concept, but I think it makes an interesting statement, because you can, to me, it means that you can really express yourself and show who you are, you know, in a fashion way, like through what you wear, through what you put in your hair. But it becomes more than a fashion image. It makes a statement that is bigger than just, oh, I look cool and interesting, but it also shows where you stand when it comes to, you know, climate awareness and recycling and things like that. So, you know, another personal project. This one was done obviously with a collaboration with a larger team, but it's still up to you as a photographer to think through all these elements. You know, what light you're going to use, how to make the shots interesting with the subject's expression, but also in combination with what they're wearing, what color their hair is, accessories that are in their hair or in somewhere else. Like, these are the things that you can rely. Of course, you can ask for a stylist or hairstylist or makeup artist to help you with, but it's very important for you, because you're making kind of like the final decision if the shot is done, or it's still, or there's still something missing, or there's maybe too much of something. So you are kind of like the art director, so you have to tell your team what is working, what is not working for you. So all these elements, they have to be thought through. And when you're even photographing like simple, the first project that I shared with you with the essence of beauty, the portraits of different women, I didn't go with the random, things that they brought to wear, or didn't rely on themselves to style their hair. I wanted the hair to be styled in a specific way, the makeup to be done in a specific way, to really tell what I wanted to tell, even though it was their story and I knew and I was aware, and I was very respectful to what they wanted to tell. But at the same time, I know what visually is going to work and what's going to make an impact. So you have to think through all these elements and make these creative decisions on set and of course ahead of time. So this is one of the subjects as well. And one more girl. Yeah, they all had like completely different personalities, and my team and I would just try to match to who they are in real life, what they like, what colors they like to wear, what the personality is like, but still keeping that statement of generation climate, keeping that in mind. So now I wanted to talk about, for the remaining amount of time, and then we will have another maybe 20-30 minutes to answer your questions. But now I wanted to talk more about my process and my practice, and hopefully give you some insights into how I approach creating ideas. So to me, idea can always be expressed through key feelings. So for example, when I create my self-portraits, or even the series with the Essence of Beauty women portraits, I always keep this like keywords in mind, like how can I describe that idea? Okay, it's about, for example, my self-portraits. I'm female, it's about my identity, it's about also questions of beauty, and there's also a certain element of struggle. So, okay, so I can describe this idea in these, few words, keywords, or, couple of sentences. But, okay, what do these words actually mean to me? Because if I don't know how I feel about it, I don't know how to emotionally express it in an image. So when I think of female in regards to myself or this, other women that I photographed, I always think of two aspects: vulnerable and strong. So to me, it's very important to show both the vulnerability of my subjects. You can connect with them through their vulnerability. You can feel more for what they're going through. But at the same time, I don't want you to just pity them. I also want you to see that they're actually strong, or I'm strong in my self-portraits. So these two aspects are very important to me. So I want to express emotionally these two feelings. And then, okay, identity. Okay, what does it mean? I want to talk about identity in a portrait. What does it mean to me? Specifically, I feel like, I lost my identity, or I was forced to lose it at some point. But also I feel like identity can be very restricting. When I put it into this like description, like when I have these two descriptive words, lost or restricted, I can already start visualizing, okay, lost, how can I express feeling lost? I'm thinking of a space, or I'm thinking of a color or lighting, and like, some visions start coming to mind, or the same about restricted or vulnerable and things like that. And then when I think of beauty, what does it mean to me? Okay, I feel like beauty can be a lot of pressure. Like you have to feel beautiful. You have to follow certain guidelines and standards and all of that. But at the same time, beauty can be very deceptive. Like, what is beautiful? You go on Instagram, you see, that one specific angle, somebody photographed themselves and put on a filter or just use a wide angle lens, and it can be very, very deceptive. And then struggle. Okay, what can struggle feel like? Okay, it's defiance and it's rejection to me, personally. But you may have your own feelings. It's there's no right or wrong, and you may find your own ways of expressing those feelings. But it's important to, when you're approaching a project, to kind of outline, okay, this is what I want to talk about. This is female identity and beauty. Well, this is what I feel when I think of these 3 keywords. So the feelings play a major role, because if you don't know how you feel, your viewer who's going to be looking at these pictures, they will not know how to feel, how to respond to it either, because you had no, emotion invested in the image. So now, how can we translate those feelings into images? And so we have these amazing tools available to us as photographers. We have color, we have light, we have shape and form, we have line, texture, and space. So I think we are in a more advantageous position than even painters, because we also have light. Painters have color and shape and line and texture, all of that. But we also have light. So with the light, we can manipulate an emotion, a feeling in an image, from changing the light from soft to hard, from, having the light on the background or making the background completely dark, creating the space, the sense of space with the light, or making it look completely flat. Like there's no depth in an image. All these things are, that are available to you, and you can control it as a photographer. And plus, on top of that, you have color, that will, of course, emotionally affect your viewer. And then you have shapes, and when you think of shapes, okay, how can the shape translate the feeling? Well, if you think of, softer organic forms, is one shape. Or if you think of something geometric with a lot of like angles and zigzags and all of that, then it's a completely different feeling. The same with a line. It can be a line that leads to the subject. It can be the line that goes across someone's face, cuts their face into 2 halves, or, be very important role of the line in an image. And then texture as well can be something, glossy and shiny, and that conveys one feeling, and then something, fuzzy and, with a lot of like small texture that absorbs the light, can create a completely different atmosphere and different feeling. And the same with the space, how much space you have in an image. If it's a tight crop, not much space, very restricting kind of tight framing, it's one feeling. And then, when you have a lot of space and your subject is like 5% of the frame, it's a completely different feeling. So I invite you to think, if I were to give you this assignment on vulnerability, you don't have to answer out loud, but just think for yourself, through what color, through what kind of light, what shades and texture would you use, and how much space would you use in a composition, in an image, to express vulnerability. And I'm sure that you will come up with different answers. Somebody will say, oh, I will use blue color. And somebody will say, well, no, vulnerability means more maybe red to me. Or somebody will say, no, it's going to be black and white, and it's going to be a lot of darkness around. And someone will say, the subject is going to be very, very small in an image. And somebody will say, no, it's going to be a close-up, but showing, all the lines and wrinkles in their face or their skin, and that's going to make them feel vulnerable. Or it's going to be, you know, that spotlight on them. No, it's going to be a very, very soft light, and everything will look like this empty space around them. So, you know, you can just start your imagination running, but there's no right or wrong answer, but you should have an answer for yourself, because if you know how to express what you're feeling through all these visual language tools, then the other people will also respond emotionally to your image. And just as an example, when I start working on a project, I always try to not look for references from other photographers. I know, okay, these are the feelings that I want to talk about, you know, the vulnerability and strength and you know, deception and defiance, you know, all these things. And then I think, like, okay, what color do I want to use? How much space do I want to have? What kind of lines? You know, I start asking all these questions. And then I go on, you know, Pinterest or artsy.com, or like, you know, websites, libraries that have a lot of visual content, but not from just photographers, but also like painters and sculptors, you know, other visual artists. And I start just browsing, sometimes randomly, sometimes I just type in blue or, you know, to combination of colors or abstract lines or something. And I start browsing and I pull the images that really resonate with me in a way, like, oh yeah, that's the right color palette. Oh, I like the texture here. Oh, this feels right to me. You know, feels, you know, it's just it's a very sort of not non-logical response, but it feels right because you already have the, you know, the set of feelings in your head. Okay, I want to talk about this. And so this was a visual research done for my self-portraits that I will show you on the next page. But you can see, you know, it's from different artists, from different types of art. But you can see some consistency in what I was thinking and feeling. They probably already evoke some emotions when you look at it. And so, so this was a research for this one, which is called Sweetie. It's a self-portrait, which is based on the contrast, again, of that strength and vulnerability. You know, when you're called Sweetie as a woman, obviously it's a diminishing term, but at the same time, like, my expression and my body language is, you know, is quite strong and confronting. And as well as for this image was the same kind of research, even probably even more sort of expressing even more an outburst of energy that I had in mind that I wanted to express. You know, there is this aspect of vulnerability, but also this aspect of confrontation and strength and getting ready to break out in, you know, all these things. This is the lighting diagram that I wanted to share with you, which I use, this setup that I use for most of my self-portraits, mostly relying, I've shot a couple of them with with an artificial light, but trying to recreate the same idea here. But now I have, I don't know, 15 of them over the years. And I try to use just the window light for all of them. You will say, oh, well, window light, you know, what's the secret here? You know, nothing special. But I think it's not, you know, what you use, but how you use it. So in this case, I you know, any light I use, obviously I shape, but you can shape natural light as well. So in this case, you know, there's always flag on the left that is blocking partially some of the window light so that the light hits the subject, in this case, myself, but the flag blocks the light of the background. So there's a separation between me and the background, or partial separation. It's not always like perfectly dark, or sometimes it's a transition there. I always find, depending on my self-portrait, exactly the idea, and other elements that are in the shot, mostly my props. But I don't just rely on just the plain window light. I always see, okay, where would I position that flag? How much of the background I want blocked? And what's the contrast between me and the background? What's the lighting ratio between the subject and the background? And of course, on the other side, there can be fill, usually like a white reflector or a white polyboard. But also sometimes it could be a negative fill. Like maybe I want more contrast in this particular self-portrait. Maybe I need, more contrasty sort of shadow side, like a darker shadow side and darker outline on the right-hand side. So yeah, don't just shoot, just try, move the flag, you move your light position. Like if it's a window light, obviously you can't move the window, but you can move all the other elements and see where the light hits your subject and how much of the light is reaching the subject versus the background, how dark the shadow is compared to the light on the subject, and maybe you want the shadow to be darker or want the shadow to be not as dark. So that all will change the feeling and the character. Again, going back to, the feelings and the emotions. So this is all very, very important. So just, take time to look and compare. And another art direction example. So this is usually what I create, not just for myself, but also when I work with teams, with other creatives. So for example, we have a model. So she was, we were shooting her for the Essence of Beauty project. So she had a disability. Her name is Nancy. And, I talked to her. I had a preliminary Zoom call. I needed to understand her story and her personality. And I wanted to see, okay, through which color I wanted to show, who she is. And she's very sort of like this lighthearted, very easygoing, this like, yeah, super kind and soft woman. And I wanted to show, of course, that side of her. But at the same time, I wanted to celebrate her strength and resilience. So yeah, so that's what I was thinking, these are the colors that I wanted to use, this kind of like cooler color palette, juxtaposing with a warmer tone of her skin, and using probably like a warmer, slightly warmer light source. And another challenging thing was to decide on the poses that would possibly show her disability, like her leg, but also, will not probably be too vulnerable looking. It's still like, look like she's proud of who she is, and I'm also celebrating and sort of looking up to her. So what I also create for my team is I create this hair and makeup and styling inspiration. Like I said before, like all the elements in the shot, even if it's not a fashion shoot, they're still sort of, they should still be under your control. Don't just rely on some stylist to come up with it, or even if you're not working with a stylist and if you're just doing documentary portraits, you still look at what your subject has in their wardrobe, what they can potentially wear to maybe make a contrast with the background or to convey their story better. Like in this case, because she had this disability and the leg, it was important to me that the fabric was quite thin, and it would flow around her body, so it would hug her curves and emphasize the shapes of her body rather than wearing something very structured and very geometric. And the hair, for example, so naturally she had a fringe, and I wanted the hair to be away from the face. I wanted the face to be open. That creates a completely different expression. And when you think of it like, yourself or someone, if you change the hair, how it's arranged around the face, it may change their face entirely. So don't disregard that part, that you can manipulate the emotion and expression of your subject, the subject's character, by just changing their hair. So I did some sketches as well, trying to figure out the pose again. I wasn't quite sure. I wanted to do like full body, but also maybe not necessarily full body. This is not just about the disability, but about who she is in general. So something also helps maybe to communicate with the team, so they know what kind of framing you're going for, what you're going to see in the shot. Especially working with the stylist, are we going to see the shoes is always a question. No shoes, things like that. And so these are the resulting portraits. So I use the warm light on her, so you can see that the skin, especially in the one on the right, you can see it even better because it was a harder light, so there's more separation between her and the background. But yeah, it's a warmer light on her and a cooler light on the environment. So it's not just the background, but also the foreground. So this is the lighting diagram. So I had a tungsten light as my key light. So very, very warm light. And then there's this window light that is a much cooler light that affected everything, all the areas where the tungsten light didn't reach the subject, or the areas that it didn't reach. So the shadows on the subject, the shadows on the table that she was sitting on, the background, all these elements. Because of the difference in temperature and light, they turn different colors. So that's how I achieved, because in reality, the background looked white, but it turned out to look more blue because of that combination between warm light on the subject and the general ambient light being blue or cooler. And you can see also flagging the window light partially, and the fill on the other side to create this really, really soft effect. And the tungsten light that I'm using, you can see this like large square underneath it. So I used it diffused through this one-stop silk. This is a very, very large diffuser. It's really hard to explain this in one diagram, but the larger your diffuser is, the softer the light becomes. And if you move your light source closer to the diffuser, it becomes a very much smaller light. But if you move it far away, then it basically fills up the entire space of that silk that I had. Then it becomes really, really soft. And one last shoot that I wanted to share with you, one of the recent ones. This model, she's not a model, she's not a professional model, but this person, she has also alopecia. For some reason, I'm really drawn to people with alopecia, I don't know. But somehow I've photographed a few of them. But what I was interested really in this particular person, because they had these two sides to their personality and to what they, or how they express themselves. So it was this both feminine and masculine aspect of it, and this, again, like this strength and vulnerability, this resilience. And so I looked at what they wear on a daily basis, what they're into, and so I tried to express that through the portraits of them. What's interesting, these two, they're side by side, but the light is quite different. Can you tell how, what are the light sources that I used in this one? Just answer for yourself, and then I'll move to the next slide and we'll review. But yeah, these are two different lighting setups on these two. And you can tell by looking at the highlights on the subject, looking at the shadow how defined the lines on the shadow, where the shadow ends are. Like if it's a very defined borderline, then obviously it's a harder light. If the transition of the from the shadow to the lighter part, if the transition is really long, that is obviously a very, very soft light. And it doesn't mean that you cannot create the same mood or a similar mood, but it still makes quite a different sort of type of personality. Like with the harsher light, it emphasizes more, you know, all the wrinkles in the face and all the, you know, if their eyebrows are furrowed or, you know, lips are pursed, you know, all these like nuances in the face. Harder light will emphasize that. Okay, so the one on the right, image on the right, again, this one. This was the setup for that one. Also using that hard continuous light with the 3000 Kelvin temperature. Not modified in any way, just a Fresnel light, Fresnel lens. And so this very kind of like sunlight kind of effect on the skin. And the background was lit by these two strobes, which is cooler white balance. And yeah, so again, that created that separation in temperature. You can see the warmer light hitting the subject's face, but also partially reaching the background. That's where the background looks warmer. And the shadow side on the right side of the background and on the left side of the model, you can see that it looks more blue. So yeah, I really like playing with this juxtaposition, especially when I want to emphasize the juxtaposition of different traits of the character or different emotions. Like I said, you know, masculine, feminine, or vulnerable, strong. You know, I really like playing with these different colors of light. And the second one was shot with a really, really soft light. So this is the one on the left here. The diagram is flipped. The light was on the right. But the idea stays the same. So it's a really large octa that was very close to the model that creates this really, really soft light, but it's also positioned in a way that it only hits one side of the model. It's kind of like a split lighting. So you have one side lit, the other one is in the shadow. And then I also had a negative fill on the right to emphasize that shadow. So on the left in this case. So that the shadow still stays quite dramatic. I didn't want it to be overall too soft. I still kind of want a similar feeling between the two images. And yeah, last thing before we move on to questions, I wanted to share some of the sources of inspiration. Maybe you guys already know and have read this particular book. So it's called Photographer's Sketchbooks. I find it, you know, very inspiring and also like helpful as a resource. I will share the doc with you so you can check out the links. But it's like it follows the process of different photographers, how they do their research, how they plan the project, you know, what things that they, you know, take into consideration. And, you know, I think it's just very inspiring just to see behind the scenes kind of project. And then some links to just in general visual arts resources that I find inspiring, and you know, check out once in a while what artists they have now, what, you know, who they're featuring, what's being exhibited, things like that. So then the one on the left is the visual arts and the one on the right is photography. I'm sure, you know, everyone knows about lens culture. But maybe you haven't heard of aperture.org or foam.org or, you know, all these other magazines. And Clarkson Project is kind of like an agency that represents photographers who work in storytelling, like narrative-based format, which I also find really, really inspiring. Yeah, just to kind of like, you know, you have to keep up with the industry, what's happening. not just in your field, but in other arts. If you are into fashion, or you are into documentary photography, don't just look at documentary photographer, don't just look at fashion, look at other artists as well, because again, that will broaden your perspective, but also you will be able to add something more like a more of a unique vision into the way you work, into your art. But also stay connected to who you are. Like, what are the subjects? Always think of what are the subjects that are really matter to you, that are really something that you're passionate about. Like I've taught a fashion course when I was living in New York, and there were a lot of students taking it. And sometimes I ask, okay, who is your favorite designer? Or, what are the stylists that you follow, or magazine creative directors? And they wouldn't know, they wouldn't give me any names. Well, and I think you have to kind of like live and breathe fashion, like if you want to shoot fashion, or if you want to shoot, other type of commercial work, documentary work, you have to also, stay in that, that has to be your, day-to-day, things that you go and check, that you keep up with, and you just keep up with the industry, keep up with other artists who work in that same field. So you stay up to date, you stay inspired, but also not just in your field, but keep yourself inspired by other artists as well. Thank you so much. I'm ready for questions now.
Well, thank you very much, Kristina, and we'll open it up to questions. So, do you have any questions? Did you hear that?
No.
Okay. How do you meet people who are you photographed a lot of people with disabilities, and how would you go about meeting them? I think that was your question, wasn't it? Yeah.
Meeting them like on set already, or just finding them?
Yeah, finding them in the first place.
Just everywhere. Like I said, you just have to be on the lookout for interesting stories and interesting subjects, through friends, through whatever you are. I don't know, maybe you are into rock climbing, or you are into cycling, or anything that's also a field of your interest. See if there are any people that you come across, that you meet, that might make potentially an interesting subject, or have an interesting story in your own family. Like, look at your, I don't know, maybe your grandparents or friends of grandparents maybe have an interesting story. Just, that's literally everywhere. Of course, on social media and Instagram, if you follow maybe a certain community, a certain hashtag, sometimes people reach out to me as well, like with the Essence of Beauty project, because I worked on it for almost 3 years. And while I was sharing the images, other people would respond and say like, oh, this really resonated with me, and I also have a daughter who has this, for example, or I'm myself disabled, and people start reaching out to you when you put your work out there as well. But yeah, I mean, literally anywhere, just basically stay, keep your eyes open, stay open to different ideas, different stories, and just be curious.
I've got a question. You mentioned because a lot of your work looks, well, is very polished and very finished. Is there a what role does testing have in your in the way that you because we often see the kind of final image, and you've very kindly shared with us some of your lighting diagrams. But is there a process that that leads into that, where you experiment with different types of light for certain things, where there's a testing process that goes on behind behind that before you actually bring that that thing to its final conclusion. Could you say a little bit about that, perhaps?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think testing in general, like, just experimenting with your friends or whoever is available, your friends or family, whoever have time, can you go to studio with me, or can you go to this location with me? I just wanted to see, how this light works, or how this, environment works for me. I think it's very, very important, especially in the beginning, while you're still figuring out different sort of relationship of different types of light, the background light versus the subject light, different light on location, different time of day, all these nuances. I think until you kind, again, like, it's kind of like building your visual library. So you need to see all these pictures or store them in your mind somewhere, until you can like easily pull it out and say, like, yeah, I know for this assignment that I got, I want specifically this light. Or you cannot know until you have the, that image already stored somewhere in your mind's library, that this light looks exactly what I need. So yes, testing, of course, is really, really important. And like I said, even just moving your modifiers slightly, your flags, your reflectors, that will already change the character of your light, or that, that dialogue between the light on the subject and the light on the background. So it only comes with, like, time. You need to shoot and try and try and try, and experiment with this, like I said, like different color temperature, or maybe color gels on the light, or combining an ambient light and an artificial light. What result is that going to produce? So yeah, and I think doing personal projects also helps, because you feel less pressure and you have more time to experiment with the light as well. And
That's a really good point about feeling less pressure.
yeah,
Because you've already done it before, so you're doing it again, aren't you? When you're shooting live, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just all about eliminating the pressure and knowing what you want and how fast you can achieve that.
Can you say a little bit about, because most of your work the way you've described it seems that it's almost finished the minute you capture the raw file. What role does post-production, does it play any role in your work, or is there some work which is more which you do much more post-production on than others, or is that very light touch?
I think it depends what you call a light touch, because I pay a lot of attention to color, like I've already mentioned, describing my process. So I just take that color further in post. So for example, I want, the background to be cooler and the subject to be warmer, just, as a simple example. Then I usually work in Capture One. And then I select that, color of the background or a certain area, and I will just tweak it to the point that's the right shade of blue that I want, or the right shade of green that I want. So I do a lot of that kind of like nuanced color adjustment. And tonal corrections as well. So for example, I want like more of a film look, and I shot it digital, or I shot it both digital and film, and I'm trying to match. Or like I want, for example, a lot of times when you shoot with like harder light or more contrasty light, you maybe want to reduce the contrast on the person, because you want their skin to look a little softer, because I don't want to do too much work on the skin unless it's a beauty image, unless it's a whole commercial purpose of it is beauty and have a perfect skin texture. But if it's a portrait, I want the skin to just look, as real as possible. So sometimes I just make it look softer by reducing the contrast.
Yeah.
So it's like small things, but they matter. So yeah, colors and tones is what I work with a lot. And then and that's mostly done in Capture One. And then in Photoshop, I do like clean up, background, if something, there's dirt or some elements that need to be removed, things like that, just a final cleanup. And I also add sometimes a little bit of sharpening to certain areas, or a little bit of grain to overall image. But it does important, because then it creates your kind of your final signature look, even if it's small things, but it's your aesthetic, so you cannot really take it lightly. This one I want to be very vivid and full of contrast, and in this one I want to be soft and black and white. And I mean, it has to have your touch on it, like why you're making these decisions. I think is because you are who you are, and this is how you see the world and how you see your subjects. So yes, it's very, very important.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. I mean, you can see the consistency throughout your outputs. There's a consistency in the way you look at things, the sensitivity to light, to color, and that's what I'm trying to kind of get to. Really was to kind of highlight that, really, that level of consistency is actually the thing that people buy into when they employ you to do their products or projects. It's that level of consistency where you look at all of the stuff that you've done, even over the whole of the stuff you've shown us here. There's a certain consistency, whether you're shooting indoors or outdoors, or on location. There's a certain kind of look and aesthetic, which is what you were talking about earlier. So
yes, that's very important. People hiring you, they need to understand what they're going to get as a result.
yeah.
So your work has to be consistent, even though it's like completely different subjects. And
Yeah. Have we got any more questions? Silence. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time.
No, are you
Yes.
sure? Maybe if you give a minute, people will come up with something. No.
Oh, I was going to ask you, because we talked the other day a little bit about, and I actually looked at that Swedish director,
Oh,
and there's some really interesting lighting effects in that. The kind of certainly I watched the pigeon on a branch contemplating the meaning of life, or some, is it something like that?
contemplating on
And
existence, I think. Yeah.
yeah, the meaning of existence, that's it. And the lighting in that is actually quite there's a real signature to that, whether it's indoors and outdoors, and the color palettes as well. The color grading, the whole thing is very consistent.
Yeah, it's very controlled. And I think that's what makes him or any other person a successful artist, that there are no accidents. Everything is thought through.
Yes, absolutely. Do you shoot much? Have you moved into kind of doing more moving image, or are you sticking with? Is there any ambition, or do you have more moving image stuff?
Well, I've only experimented with small videos, like for fashion or beauty, or this type of like very short stories, like the one I did with Freya, the teenage girl with alopecia. So it's like the small like snippets, kind of like documentary, very short film. But yeah, I would like to do eventually something bigger, but I would say it will be probably more fine art rather than commercial.
Yes. Okay. Oh,
What are the main differences being for shooting with models or doing self-portrait.
What are the main differences between shooting models and ordinary people?
Self-portraits.
Sorry?
Self-portraits.
And the self-portraits.
Quite a difference. So I think it
Right.
depends.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah.
It depends on the agenda of the shoot, right? So if you're shooting a product or something for the commercial purpose, it's easier then to achieve that in a shorter amount of time with an experienced model, because they are relaxed in front of the camera. So that you don't have to kind of break through that, that first initial, series of images where they are still tensed up and don't know what to do. But if you're shooting something, not a product, not a commercial purpose, but if you're shooting something emotional, something more real, something you want people to really resonate with, or really feel, that I would say it's harder to work with a professional model, and it's easier to work with a not very experienced or completely inexperienced person, because they don't know how to behave in front of camera. So they just eventually, someone will relax in 5 minutes, someone will relax in 20 minutes, but eventually they let off their guard and they just become themselves. They're very, they have a very, real emotion. And obviously you discuss with them what, you talk with them, you guide them, you tell them a story, or, you talk about their own story, and they feel certain things. And then you just capture those emotions, which is harder to do with a model, because the model will still be conscious. I'm being photographed. I'm going to do my, professional job, as best I can. But yeah, so then capture the real self is much harder. And then photographing myself, in a way, it's easier because I already know, okay, this is the emotion that I want to get. This is probably the body language that I'm going to use to get it. And this is the lighting, so I need to be conscious of like turning a specific direction, and I know all of these aspects. But like technically it becomes more difficult, because then I had to have a mirror, and then I have a laptop quite often, just camera tethered to it, so I can see, because in the mirror it looks still a slightly different angle than the camera. So I just like, okay, this is still not the right angle, let me turn a little more, and then you get like really tired afterward. But yeah, it takes more time, but it's easier because you know what you're after.
It's really interesting you picking up on that, and that was a really good question, actually, because that distinction between working with models and real people is that often you don't give people, ordinary people, really time to relax. And you're right, they are so awkward sometimes in front of the camera. They don't know, they often they don't know how to behave in front of the camera. They want to please,
Yeah.
you, but that pleasing you doesn't necessarily correspond to what you want to achieve from it. Whereas models are so used to being, they have a number of looks, and you can see that from their from their portfolio. You can see that they have a certain kind of way of looking, way of holding themselves, and that kind of thing, which they've practiced. I mean, they're actors, if more than anything, and they're creating a role which is not necessarily the same as an ordinary person. So it's really good to kind of explain that difference.
Definitely.
Have we got any other questions?
Was there like a heading point in the movement that you realized you wanted to work as like a photographer, or just like in the photographic industry? So
was there a point at which you that you can look at a kind of turning point at where you wanted to become work in the photographic industry, or excuse me? So was there a kind of point at where you thought, this is the way I want to go?
Yeah, I think I was drawn to art in general, as a young kid, I would draw a lot, I would paint, and I went to like children. My parents sent me to this children art school for many years. I was taking all this like different types of classes, and then I ended up in these architecture and arts academy, studying architecture and interior design as my bachelor's degree. Because my parents thought, well, you cannot just be an artist, you have to have something, more solid where you can make money. And so I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll be an architect or interior designer. But then I just didn't feel like it was for me. And I finished my bachelor's, but then I got a master's in graphic design. And so while I was getting my master's, I already started working in advertising, like first in graphic design agencies, then gradually in advertising. And so while I was working in advertising, I got exposed to like this whole world of imagination. Like you imagine a story and then you bring it to life. You write a script, or you sketch up a billboard, and then we go and we hire, as an agency, we hire someone who shoots the commercial or shoots the does the photo shoot for the billboard or whatever. And so I was in an art director role for some years, and I would go to those video or photo shoots and sort of direct the other creatives, directors or photographers. And then by being on set, I realized that this is so much more fun and more inspiring than being like having a desk job, being in front of your computer all day. Even you're creating ideas, you still are creative, but still you're working with clients, working with that, and then your idea turns into something completely different, so you're not satisfied. And so I wanted to do something, I think, more artistic, where I could still make money but also express myself. And like I explained today, there are personal projects and there are commissioned jobs that are maybe not necessarily as exciting, and it doesn't maybe express who you are to that extent, but then you still have your personal work, and you can even change someone's mind, or change someone's ideas about certain things. So I feel more empowered by doing photography and being on my own, as opposed to working for a company like an ad agency. So yeah, that was a turning point. I thought this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to create, I wanted to be on set, I wanted to work with people, with models, with crews, with other creatives as well, to co-create together and to create something out of nothing, basically. You just imagine something and then you bring it to life together with your team.
At what point, can I ask, at what point you bring other people into that process? So I mean, you come up with a rough idea of something you want to produce. At what point then do you start to include other people in those discussions?
You mean in the case of a personal project, right?
Yeah, because I mean, there's a lot of students here who are kind of, they're at that point where they're either understand how to get an idea or often work on their own, and perhaps not as used to us as to to share or discuss ideas as perhaps other people are. So I just wondered if you could kind of say, well, I come up with a kind of broad concept, and then and then I bring people in that might want to add something to it. So is there a kind of point at where you realize that you want to bring more people into it or less people into it?
I think it really depends on the project. When I was doing more fashion, I think if someone like a fashion stylist or hair and makeup would play a very important role. So you need to collaborate with them from almost the very beginning. Maybe you have an overall direction, I want to shoot something a winter theme and on this location, and this is my color palette, and I want a model of a certain look, and kind of like a general direction. But then you collaborate with the stylist. Okay, what can they wear so it doesn't become too much of a, over the top, that it still has some kind of balance, or it has some interesting contrasts in it. Yeah, and how can we as also a team developing it into a story, so it's not every shot looks very similar to the next one. How can we make so that it progresses from shot to shot and it's still interesting to look at. But if it's something really, really, personal, like, some of the subjects that I photographed for the Essence of Beauty project, or for my more documentary projects, I may bring stylists, or, for example, for the Generation Climate, the teenagers we photographed with like recycled props. I already had a full concept. Basically, I had my like sketches and references and everything, and I said like, okay, this is what I want. Are you interested? Can we achieve that? And then, but at that point, they still bring in their own ideas. The makeup, the elements on the face, like the little lines that were on one of the models. It was a makeup artist's idea. I had no idea, what to do. I just thought that it has to be playful, it has to be appropriate to their age, and to the whole concept and the whole color palette, and then that was their idea. But again, I think what's important here is to choose the right people for the right projects, and that this person has this certain aesthetic, and they can come up with their own idea based on who they are, and their aesthetic. Some people are maybe less creative, but they are very good for documentary projects, and they treat your models very, very nicely and make them feel relaxed. So yeah, it's like you have to sort of make those decisions when you're selecting your team.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's a good point. Have we got any other questions? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Kristina. It's been a pleasure, and I've learned so much about your process, and it's been fascinating. It really has, and I love the fact that you've been honest and kind of shared so much of your process, which is we don't always get, but that was fantastic. So can we have a round of applause, please?
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me, and I'm happy to share the resources at the end of my presentation if you're interested in sharing the links. And
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you. I'll do that. But anyway, we've taken up enough of your time, but thank you very much again, Christine. And it was a pleasure to meet you actually the other day. And I've certainly learned to, well, I've got another director in my lexicon of film references that I can never come across. So thank you for that.
And likewise.
Yeah.
As well.
Great. Well, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.